The scent of pine and sage hung heavy in the great hall, mingling with the musk of polished wood and anticipation. I arrived too early, a habit born from years of trying to prove my worth in a world that barely noticed me. The ceremony wouldn't begin for another hour, but punctuality was the armor I wore to compensate for all the ways I didn't belong. My fingers traced the smooth, leather-bound journal in my hands, my grandmother's final gift before she passed. "Remember, Claire," she had whispered, her voice crackling like autumn leaves. "True power isn't about where you sit, but how you stand when everyone wants you to fall." I clutched the journal tighter as I entered the vast ceremonial hall of the North Ridge Pack, wondering if I'd finally find my place in this rigid hierarchy. The room stood empty, save for the impressive wooden throne at the center of the raised dais. Carved wolves with gleaming amber eyes seemed to watch my every move from the armrests and high back of the seat. Golden light filtered through stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across the stone floor and illuminating dust motes that danced in the silence. I shivered despite the warmth of my sweater, my blonde hair falling across my face as I looked around uncertainly. As the Pack's healer apprentice, I had received the formal invitation just 3 days ago, my first official recognition since joining North Ridge after my old pack was decimated by hunters. 2 years of existing on the periphery, of healing minor wounds and mixing herbal remedies while avoiding eye contact with the warriors who dominated our society. 2 years of being Claire the outsider, Claire the quiet one, Claire whose wolf was too gentle for a world that valued ferocity above all else. The invitation had felt like the first thread of belonging, and I'd spent hours last night pressing my only decent dress. A simple blue garment that matched my eyes but did little to disguise my slender frame. Lacking the muscular definition most she-wolves possessed, I approached the dais slowly, drawn by some inexplicable pull. The Alpha King's coronation ceremony would mark a new era for all werewolves in the region. Roman Gray, the name alone sent a ripple of whispers through our pack whenever mentioned. I'd glimpsed him only once, from a distance. Tall and forbidding, with shoulders that seemed capable of carrying the weight of all our futures, and eyes that held the cold calculation of a predator assessing prey. The throne beckoned, bathed in that golden light. Before I could question my actions, I climbed the 3 stone steps and stood before it, mesmerized by the intricate carvings of the ancient pack symbols. My fingers reached out, tracing the worn edges where countless alphas had rested their hands during centuries of rule. "Just for a moment," I whispered to myself, the sound echoing in the empty hall. "Just to know how it feels." I turned and lowered myself onto the throne, my heart hammering against my ribs. The seat was surprisingly comfortable, worn smooth by generations of powerful leaders. I let my hands rest where theirs had, feeling the strange warmth of the wood despite the morning chill. My grandmother's journal sat in my lap, a talisman of courage. For one breath-stealing moment, I allowed myself to imagine belonging somewhere, truly belonging. Not as the timid healer who startled at loud voices, but as someone worthy of respect. My wolf stirred within me, stretching luxuriously in a way she rarely did, as though the throne somehow recognized her when no one else ever had. The sound of approaching footsteps shattered my reverie, heavy, purposeful strides that could only belong to a dominant wolf. Panic seized me, but before I could move, the massive wooden doors swung open. He filled the doorway completely, broader and taller than I remembered from my distant glimpse. Roman Gray, Alpha King-elect, stopped abruptly, his dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that froze the breath in my lungs. Time suspended as his gaze traveled from my face to the throne I occupied, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My voice failed me as I scrambled to stand, nearly dropping my grandmother's journal in my haste. "I'm sorry, I was just sitting on my throne." His voice was deeper than I expected, each word precisely measured and laced with quiet danger. He moved toward me with the fluid grace of an apex predator, unhurried, yet unstoppable. "Do you know what happens to wolves who take what belongs to the Alpha King?" I backed away, my heel catching on the step behind me. I would have fallen if he hadn't moved with impossible speed, his hand gripping my upper arm to steady me. The contact sent a jolt through my system, heat and electricity and something else I couldn't name. His scent enveloped me, pine forests after rain, and something primal that made my wolf pace restlessly beneath my skin. "I arrived early," I managed, hating how my voice trembled. "The ceremony—" I was curious. I didn't mean any disrespect. His face remained impassive as he studied me, but something flickered in the depths of his dark eyes. Curiosity, perhaps, or amusement. Neither seemed particularly reassuring. His hand remained on my arm, neither punishing nor gentle, simply ensuring I couldn't flee. "Your name." It wasn't a question. "Claire. Claire Bennett. I'm the healer apprentice for Northridge." Recognition dawned in his expression. "Bennett, from the Red Moon Pack Massacre." The words sliced through me, reopening wounds I'd spent 2 years trying to close. I nodded, unable to speak as memories flooded back. Flames and screams and the metallic scent of blood. My parents, my little sister, all gone in a single night of violence while I was away studying healing arts in the neighboring territory. Something shifted in his expression, the barest softening around his eyes. "You shouldn't be here this early. The ceremonial space is restricted until the elders arrive." "I'll go," I whispered, trying to step around him. He didn't release my arm. "You still haven't explained why you were sitting on my throne." The truth would sound ridiculous, that I was imagining a strength I'd never possess, that I was pretending to be someone who mattered. I clutched my grandmother's journal tighter and opted for partial honesty. I wanted to feel it, the history, the legacy. I've never belonged anywhere since. I swallowed hard. Since I lost my pack, I suppose I wanted to understand what it feels like to have a place that's unquestionably yours. His eyes narrowed, searching my face for deception. Whatever he saw made him release my arm slowly, his fingers trailing down to my wrist in a touch so light it might have been accidental. "The ceremony begins in an hour. You can return then." He turned toward the throne, effectively dismissing me. I should have been relieved to escape without punishment. Instead, I felt strangely disappointed, as though I'd failed some test I hadn't known I was taking. I'd made it halfway to the door when his voice stopped me. "Claire Bennett." I turned, finding him seated on the throne I'd vacated, looking every inch the king he was about to officially become. The morning light caught in his dark hair, illuminating strands of auburn I hadn't noticed before. "Yes?" "Your grandmother. She was Eliza Bennett? The seer?" Surprise rippled through me. "Yes. How did you—" "I make it my business to know the bloodlines in my territories." His fingers drummed once on the armrest. "Interesting that her gift didn't manifest in you." I clutched the journal tighter, feeling oddly defensive. "Not all gifts are visible, Alpha King." A smile touched his lips for the first time. Sharp and unexpected. "No, they're not." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, healer. If you could sit on this throne again, what would you do with the power it represents?" The question caught me off guard, genuine rather than mocking. I considered my answer carefully, aware that this interaction could define my place in the new order he would establish. "I would use it to protect," I said finally, the words coming from some place deeper than thought. "Not just the strong who can protect themselves, but those at the edges. Those who have lost their voices or never had them to begin with." Something unreadable flickered in his eyes. "You should go now." I nodded, turning to leave, feeling his gaze follow me until the heavy doors closed behind me. My heart refused to slow its frantic rhythm as I leaned against the cool stone wall of the corridor, trying to process what had just happened. This encounter would change nothing. I would still be the quiet healer who blended into backgrounds. He would still become Alpha King, ruling with the cold efficiency that had made him legendary among the packs. Yet as I walked through the gradually filling halls, nodding politely to arriving dignitaries and pack members, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. Like the first tremor before an avalanche, too subtle to notice unless you were standing in exactly the right place, or the wrong one. I didn't realize I was still clutching my grandmother's journal until I felt the warm leather against my palm, the words of her final entry echoing in my mind. Destiny rarely announces itself with fanfare, my dear one. More often, it arrives in moments of apparent mistake. The hour passed in a blur as I retreated to a small alcove off the main corridor, trying to collect myself. Pack members and visiting dignitaries streamed past in their ceremonial finest, furs and leathers for the traditionalists, sleek modern attire for those embracing the new era Roman gray supposedly represented. I smoothed my simple blue dress, suddenly aware of how plain it looked compared to the finery around me. "There you are." A familiar voice broke through my thoughts. Nora, the pack's head healer and my mentor, approached with quick steps. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in an elegant knot, her ceremonial healer's robe marking her position. "I've been looking everywhere for you. I came early," I said, not mentioning my encounter with the Alpha King. She gave me an appraising look. "You're pale. Are you feeling ill?" "Just nervous," I replied, forcing a smile. "I've never attended anything this formal." Nora squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Stay close to me." Healer Bennett and Apprentice Bennett, just as the invitation stated. She lowered her voice, though why Thomas insisted you specifically be included in the invitation remains a mystery. Thomas Gray, Roman's younger brother and closest advisor. I'd never spoken to him, though I'd treated his mate, Sophia, for a training injury last month. A coincidence, surely. "It's starting," Nora whispered, guiding me toward the Great Hall. "Remember your place. Second row, healer's section. Keep your eyes lowered during the oath-taking. It's considered disrespectful to..." "Watch an alpha channel the ancestral power," I finished. I remember the protocols. The hall had transformed in my absence. Hundreds of candles bathed the space in warm light, and every seat was filled save for the ceremonial spaces at the front. The air hummed with tension and excitement, conversations blending into white noise as Nora led me to our designated places. I could feel eyes on me as we took our seats, curious glances and a few outright stares. As one of the few survivors of Red Moon Pack, I'd grown accustomed to being an object of morbid fascination, though I never understood why anyone would envy being the last of your bloodline. "That's her," someone whispered behind me, "the one they call Ghost Wolf." I stiffened at the nickname I hadn't heard in months, a cruel reference to both my pale coloring and the rumor that my wolf was as insubstantial as mist, too weak to take physical form. I'd manifested late at 19, and my wolf's gentle nature had always been viewed as a defect in our warrior culture. Nora shot a silencing glare over her shoulder, and the whispers ceased. She had always been my fiercest defender, taking me in when I arrived at Northridge with nothing but grief and my grandmother's journal. The ceremonial horn sounded, 3 long notes that resonated through the hall and brought immediate silence. The doors swung open, and the procession began, pack elders first, followed by the territorial leaders, each wearing the symbolic colors of their domains, and then he entered. Roman Gray moved with the contained power of a predator who had never needed to hurry. His ceremonial attire was simpler than I expected. Black pants and a deep crimson shirt under a leather jacket adorned with the ancient symbols of the Gray bloodline. No crown, no excessive ornaments. His authority needed no external markers. My breath caught as his gaze swept the room, pausing for the briefest moment when it reached the healer's section. Had he recognized me? I lowered my eyes quickly, but not before I noticed the slight narrowing of his gaze. The ceremony proceeded according to tradition. The pack elders recited the ancient laws, their voices blending in practiced harmony. The territorial leaders stepped forward one by one, pledging allegiance to the new Alpha King. Through it all, Roman stood immobile, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. "The time has come," announced Elder Miriam, her voice carrying despite her advanced age, "for the Alpha King to take his oath and receive the blessing of our ancestors." Roman stepped onto the dais, turning to face the assembly. The silence deepened as he placed his hand on the ancient stone tablet, inscribed with the first pack laws. "I, Roman Alexander Gray, claim the right of my blood and the strength of my wolf to serve as Alpha King of the United Territories." His voice filled the hall without effort, commanding attention. "I vow to protect our people, preserve our ways, and lead with the wisdom of those who came before me." As he spoke the final words, a visible ripple of energy pulsed through the hall, the ancestral power acknowledging his claim. Gasps rose from the assembly. Such a strong response hadn't been seen in generations. I felt it like a physical touch, a warm current flowing through the air, carrying with it whispers of ancient voices. My skin tingled, and deep within, my wolf stirred restlessly, rising closer to the surface than she had in years. I gripped the edge of my seat, struggling to maintain control. Nora glanced at me, concern etching her features. "Claire?" "I'm fine," I whispered, though I was anything but. Something was happening that I didn't understand, a resonance between the ancestral power and something deep within me. Roman's gaze suddenly snapped in my direction, his eyes widening fractionally. Could he sense it too? The connection snapped as quickly as it had formed when Elder Miriam stepped forward with the ceremonial goblet. "Drink, Alpha King, and seal your bond with the blood of the first wolf." The liquid within wasn't actual blood, but a sacred herbal mixture that symbolized the lineage passed down through generations. Roman drank without hesitation, and another wave of power pulsed through the hall, stronger than the first. This time, I couldn't contain my reaction. A small gasp escaped my lips as heat flooded my veins, my vision blurring momentarily. My wolf pushed against my consciousness, no longer content to remain dormant. I closed my eyes, silently pleading with her to settle. "What's wrong?" Nora hissed, gripping my wrist. "I don't know," I managed, struggling to breathe normally. "Something about the ceremony is affecting my wolf." Before she could respond, Elder Miriam's voice rose again. "The ancestors have spoken. Roman Grey is confirmed as Alpha King." She turned to address him directly. "As is tradition, you may now select your ceremonial attendants for the coming year, those who will stand as extensions of your authority." This was unexpected. The tradition of ceremonial attendance was ancient and rarely observed in modern times, a holdover from when the Alpha King required personal representatives in far-flung territories. Roman nodded solemnly, descending the dais steps to stand before the assembly. "I claim this right and name my attendants." He gestured to his brother, Thomas Grey, as Blood Council. No surprise there. Thomas stepped forward, accepting the silver armband that marked his position. "Marcus Donovan, as War Chief." The hulking warrior from Stone Creek territory moved forward, his scarred face impassive as he received his armband. "Eliza Winters, as Diplomatic Envoy." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Eliza was young for such a position, though her skill in negotiation was widely acknowledged. Roman paused, his gaze sweeping the assembly once more. The next words froze the breath in my lungs. "Claire Bennett, as Personal Healer." The hall went silent. I sat immobile, certain I'd misheard. Nora's grip on my wrist tightened painfully. "Claire Bennett," Roman repeated, his voice carrying an edge of impatience. "Step forward." On legs that threatened to buckle, I rose and moved toward the dais. The walk felt endless, the weight of hundreds of stairs pressing against me like a physical force. Whispers followed in my wake, disbelief, speculation, outright derision. Why her? The ghost wolf. She's barely qualified as an apprentice. I kept my gaze fixed on Roman, seeking some explanation in his expression. His face revealed nothing, but his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my heart race. I stopped before him, fighting the urge to fidget under his scrutiny. "Alpha King," I managed, my voice barely audible. "Claire Bennett," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Do you accept the position of personal healer to the Alpha King?" I should refuse. I was underqualified, unprepared, and unwanted by most of the assembly. Yet something deeper than reason pushed me to respond. "I accept the honor, Alpha King." He held my gaze a moment longer before reaching for the silver armband, smaller than the others but identical in design. As his fingers brushed my skin, that same jolt of electricity shot through me, and I heard his sharp intake of breath. He felt it too. The armband felt surprisingly warm against my skin, almost alive with a subtle pulse that matched my heartbeat. Roman's hand lingered a moment longer than necessary, before he stepped back. "The selections are complete," Elder Miriam announced. "The feast will now commence in celebration of our new Alpha King and his chosen attendants." The assembly rose, the tension breaking as conversations erupted throughout the hall. I stood frozen, unsure where to go or what to do next. Roman turned away without another word, immediately surrounded by territorial leaders vying for his attention. A firm hand gripped my elbow, and I turned to find Thomas Grey beside me. His resemblance to his brother was striking, though his features were less severe, his eyes holding a warmth Roman's lacked. "Come with me," he said quietly. "There are things you need to know." He led me through a side door and down a corridor I'd never noticed before, away from the noise of the gathering. We entered a small study lined with books, a fire crackling in the hearth. Why me? I asked the moment the door closed behind us. There are dozens of qualified healers. Nora has 30 years of experience. I'm nothing, nobody. Thomas studied me with unsettling intensity. You're Eliza Bennett's granddaughter. That doesn't answer my question, doesn't it? He gestured for me to sit, taking the chair opposite me. My brother doesn't make decisions lightly, Claire. Especially not public ones that will be questioned by every alpha in the territories. Then why? Because he sensed something in you, the same thing I sensed when I watched you heal Sophia. He leaned forward. You don't just treat injuries, Claire. You connect with something deeper. I shook my head. I'm a competent healer at best. My wolf is... Misunderstood, he interrupted. Like many things about you. The door opened before I could respond. Roman entered, his presence immediately filling the room. He'd removed his ceremonial jacket, and the simple crimson shirt emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his arms. Leave us, he said to Thomas, who rose without argument. At the door, Thomas paused. Remember what we discussed, brother. The northern packs won't wait much longer for an answer. Roman's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. The door closed with a decisive click, leaving me alone with the Alpha King. You're wondering why I selected you, he said without preamble. Yes. Your reaction during the ceremony. He moved closer, his gaze intent. You felt it, didn't you? The ancestral power. I swallowed hard. Everyone did. Not like you. He circled me slowly, studying me as one might examine a puzzle. Your wolf responded. I saw it, felt it. That's impossible. You couldn't possibly. I am Alpha King, he cut in, his voice deepening with authority. I sense every wolf in my presence, their strength, their nature, their potential. He stopped directly in front of me. Yours has been hiding. I stared up at him, caught between indignation and fear. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? He reached out, his fingers brushing the silver armband. Your grandmother's journal. What does it tell you about your lineage? The question startled me. How did you... Answer the question, Claire. I fought the urge to step back from his looming presence, from the intensity of his gaze that seemed to strip away all pretense. My grandmother wrote about our family history, I said carefully. Stories of our ancestors, healing traditions passed down through generations. Nothing about your wolf? Roman pressed, his voice deceptively soft. I hesitated, my fingers instinctively seeking the reassurance of my grandmother's journal, only to remember I'd left it in the alcove during the ceremony. She believed my wolf was special but different. She called her a quiet walker. Something flashed in Roman's eyes, recognition. When was the last time you shifted? The question pierced through my carefully constructed defenses. I dropped my gaze to the floor, shame burning my cheeks. 2 years ago. The night my pack was attacked, his silence compelled me to continue. I was miles away when it happened, studying with an elder healer. I felt them dying, each one, like threads snapping inside me. My voice threatened to break, but I forced myself to continue. I shifted and ran all night, but by the time I arrived there was nothing but ash and bone. And since then, my wolf retreated. I can feel her, but she refuses to come forward. The admission cost me, each word like swallowing broken glass. In a society where shifting was as natural as breathing, my condition was viewed as a fundamental weakness. Nora says grief can do that sometimes. That eventually... Roman's hand caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. The unexpected contact silenced me instantly, heat blooming where his fingers touched my skin. Your wolf isn't retreating from grief, Claire Bennett. She's retreating from you. The accusation stung. That's not true. I've tried everything, except accepting what she truly is. He released me and moved toward the fireplace. The ceremony wasn't supposed to affect anyone but me. Yet you felt it, didn't you? Not just the power, but the voices beneath it. I stared at him, wondering how he could possibly know that. The whispers had been so faint, yet distinct. Ancient words in a language I somehow understood without knowing. Yes, I admitted. And the throne this morning. Your wolf responded to it. I nodded, unable to deny it. Because she recognizes what you've been denying. He turned to face me fully. Your grandmother was right. You're a quiet walker. One of the old bloodlines thought to have died out centuries ago. I don't understand. No, you don't. That's precisely the problem. His frustration was palpable. I need a healer who understands the old ways, Claire. The northern packs are threatening to break away because they believe I've abandoned ancient traditions in favor of modernization. But I don't know the old ways, I protested. I'm trained in modern healing techniques with some herbal knowledge, nothing more. Yet you carry the journal of Eliza Bennett, one of the last true seers. Your bloodline is pure old pack, even if your knowledge isn't. He paced the room, tension radiating from his powerful frame. Thomas witnessed you healing his mate. He said you didn't just treat her injury. You spoke to it, convinced it to yield. I froze. I'd hoped no one had noticed that slip, the moment when I'd forgotten myself and allowed the strange intuition that sometimes guided my healing to take over completely. Sophia's dislocated shoulder had been stubborn, refusing conventional treatment. Without thinking, I'd whispered to the injury itself, negotiating with the damaged tissues as my grandmother had taught me in secret. That was unorthodox, I admitted. That was old magic, Roman corrected, the kind the northern packs still revere, the kind that could help me maintain the unity my father failed to preserve. Understanding dawned slowly. You chose me for political reasons. I chose you because I need what you represent, he countered. And because your wolf responded to the ancestral power in a way that shouldn't be possible unless... He stopped himself. Unless what? It doesn't matter. He dismissed the thought with a wave of his hand. What matters is that you've accepted the position. For the next year, you'll serve as my personal healer, accompanying me to all pack gatherings and diplomatic functions. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Leave Northridge? But my training with Nora is secondary to your duty to your Alpha King. His tone left no room for argument. You'll continue your studies under the court physician while serving in your new capacity. And if I refuse? His eyes darkened. You already accepted. Publicly. I stepped forward, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. You manipulated me. You knew I couldn't refuse in front of everyone. Yes. He showed no remorse for the admission, because I need you, Claire Bennett, whether either of us likes it or not. Before I could respond, a knock interrupted us. The door opened to reveal a stone-faced warrior I recognized as Dominic, head of the Alpha King's personal guard. The northern representatives are requesting an immediate audience, my king. Roman's jaw tightened. Tell them I'll meet with them tomorrow as scheduled. They're insisting, sir. Their Alpha, Garrett Stone, says if you don't meet with them now, they'll consider it a rejection of their concerns and act accordingly. Something dark and dangerous flashed across Roman's face, a glimpse of the predator beneath the composed exterior. Very well. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Dominic nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. This discussion isn't finished, Roman said, turning back to me. Go to the feast. Mingle. Be seen. Tomorrow morning. Be ready to travel to the capital. Pack only what you need. Everything else will be provided. Just like that. You expect me to abandon my life here with no preparation? I expect you to honor your commitment. He moved to the door, then paused. Your grandmother's journal. Keep it close. You'll need it in the days to come. After he left, I remained in the study, trying to process everything that had happened. The Quiet Walker bloodline, the old magic, the political maneuvering I'd unwittingly become part of. My mind spun with questions and implications, none of which I was equipped to answer. Eventually, I made my way to the great hall, where the feast was in full swing. Long tables groaned under the weight of traditional dishes, and mead flowed freely from ornate pitchers. The atmosphere was celebratory, but I detected undercurrents of tension, particularly among the Northern Pack representatives, who sat together in stony silence. There you are. Nora appeared at my side, her expression a mixture of concern and irritation. What happened? Why would Roman Gray choose you as his personal healer? The bluntness stung, though I knew she meant no insult. Apparently, my bloodline has political value. Her eyes widened. The Bennett connection to the old packs, but that's distant history. Not according to the Alpha King. I touched the silver armband, still warm against my skin. He's ordered me to the capital, tomorrow. Nora's shock gave way to calculation. This could be an opportunity, Claire. The court has resources we can only dream of here. Ancient texts, practitioners of the old healing arts. Or it could be a disaster, I countered. I'm not qualified for this position, Nora. Everyone knows it. Then become qualified. Her voice hardened with unexpected conviction. Your grandmother believed you were capable of far more than you've shown. Perhaps it's time you started believing it too. Before I could respond, a commotion near the high table drew our attention. Roman had returned and was engaged in what appeared to be a tense conversation with a broad-shouldered man I recognized as Garrett Stone, Alpha of the Northern Coalition. Though they kept their voices low, the rigid set of their bodies spoke of barely contained aggression. The Northern situation is worse than we thought, Nora murmured. They've been pushing for a return to the old ways since the former Alpha King died. They believe modern influences are weakening our kind. And Roman? What does he believe? That's the question, isn't it? She watched the two alphas with a healer's assessing eye. His father was a traditionalist who nearly drove us to civil war with his rigid adherence to outdated hierarchies. Roman has been more progressive, but carefully so. As we watched, Garrett's voice rose enough for his words to carry. Your father understood the importance of pure bloodlines. These diluted packs you've been cultivating will be our downfall. Roman's response was too low to hear. But whatever he said caused Garrett to slam his hand on the table, drawing all eyes in the hall. You have until the full moon, the Northern Alpha growled. Either declare your commitment to the old ways, or we declare independence from your rule. With that, he and his delegation stood and marched from the hall, leaving a wake of shocked whispers and speculative glances. Thomas appeared at Roman's side, speaking urgently in his ear. Roman nodded once, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Then, unexpectedly, his gaze found mine across the crowded room. Something passed between us, a recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the role I would play in whatever came next. I was still reeling from the intensity of that look when someone bumped roughly into my shoulder, nearly causing me to spill my untouched mead. I turned to find Kira, one of Northridge's elite warriors, staring at me with undisguised contempt. Personal healer, she sneered. We all know why he really chose you. Enlighten me, I said, refusing to be intimidated despite the way my heart raced. She leaned closer, her voice pitched for my ears alone. Rumor has it the Alpha King needs to make a political mating soon. What better choice than a weak little she-wolf from an ancient bloodline? You're malleable, Bennett, decorative. You won't challenge him like a real mate would. Her words hit with precision, targeting insecurities I'd never voiced aloud. Before I could respond, another voice cut in, cool and measured. I'd be careful about spreading rumors regarding the Alpha King's intentions. Eliza Winters, the newly appointed diplomatic envoy, stepped between us with graceful authority. That kind of talk could be construed as undermining his leadership. Kira's eyes narrowed, but she backed away. Just making conversation, she muttered before disappearing into the crowd. Thank you, I said to Eliza, grateful for the intervention. Don't thank me yet. Her smile didn't reach her calculating eyes. Court is a dangerous place for the unprepared, Claire Bennett, especially for someone with your limitations. You mean my wolf, among other things. She sipped her mead delicately. Roman has placed you in a precarious position. Many will resent your elevation, others will seek to use you for their own ends. She studied me over the rim of her cup. The question is whether you're clever enough to navigate those waters. I didn't ask for this position. Few ask for power, she replied. The wise simply learn to wield it when it's thrust upon them. She nodded toward the high table. He's watching you, you know. Has been since you entered the room. I refused to look, keeping my attention on Eliza. Why are you telling me this? Because balance is coming to our world, Claire Bennett, whether we're ready or not. And you," she touched the silver armband on my arm, "have somehow become integral to that balance." With that cryptic statement, she glided away, leaving me more confused than ever. Despite my resolve, my eyes drifted to the high table, where Roman sat in conversation with his brother. As if sensing my gaze, he looked up, his dark eyes finding mine instantly across the crowded hall. He didn't nod or smile or give any acknowledgement, yet I felt the weight of his attention like a physical touch. In that moment, I understood that my life had irrevocably changed. Tomorrow I would leave the relative safety of Northridge for the capital, thrust into political currents I barely comprehended, serving an alpha king whose motives remained opaque. And somewhere beneath it all lay the mystery of my reluctant wolf and the Quiet Walker bloodline. Secrets my grandmother had taken to her grave, leaving only cryptic journal entries as guidance. I touched the silver armband, surprised by the sense of rightness it conveyed despite everything. Perhaps Nora was right. Perhaps this was the opportunity I needed to discover who I truly was, who I could become. Or perhaps, as Kira suggested, I was merely a pawn in a political game far beyond my understanding. Either way, there was no turning back. Dawn broke crisp and clear as I finished packing the few possessions I deemed essential for my new life. My healing herbs, carefully dried and labeled, 3 modest dresses, my grandmother's journal, which I'd retrieved from the alcove after the feast. Everything fit into a single bag, a testament to how little I'd accumulated in my 2 years at Northridge. A soft knock at my door revealed Nora, her eyes red-rimmed from what appeared to be a sleepless night. "I've brought you something," she said, extending a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. "It belonged to your grandmother. She left it in my keeping before her last journey, with instructions to give it to you when the time was right." I accepted the box with trembling hands. "And you believe now is that time?" "I believe you're following the path she foresaw." Nora's voice wavered. "She told me once that you would leave us to serve a king. I thought it a strange prophecy for a girl with such a gentle wolf." The box was surprisingly heavy. I opened it to find a silver pendant nestled on velvet, an intricate design of a wolf, with eyes of pale blue stone, surrounded by ancient symbols I recognized from my grandmother's journal. "The mark of the Quiet Walker," Nora explained softly, "worn by healers of your bloodline for generations." "You knew?" I looked up, shocked. "About my heritage?" I suspected. Eliza never confirmed it directly. She helped me fasten the pendant around my neck, where it rested cool against my skin. "There are stories, Claire, old stories about wolves who walk between worlds, who hear the whispers of spirits and speak to the essence of living things. Roman called it old magic, a crude term for something far more nuanced." She gripped my shoulders. "Listen to me, Claire. The capital is a place of power and intrigue. Trust no one completely, not even the Alpha King. Your gift makes you valuable, which makes you vulnerable." "I don't even understand my gift," I confessed. "My wolf refuses to emerge. And these abilities, healing by intuition, hearing whispers during the ceremony, they come and go without my control." "Your grandmother's journal contains more than family history," Nora said. "Study it. The answers you seek are there, hidden in plain sight." Her eyes filled with unexpected tears. "I've taught you all I can. Now you must find the rest of your path alone." I embraced her tightly, suddenly afraid. What if I fail? What if I can't be what he needs me to be? "Then you'll be what you need to be," she whispered fiercely. "Your worth isn't defined by your service to any alpha, no matter how powerful." A sharp knock interrupted us. Dominic, the Alpha King's head guard, his expression impassive. "The convoy departs in 20 minutes, Healer Bennett." The journey to the capital took most of the day, through forests and mountains that mark the boundaries between territories. I'd expected to travel with servants or lesser officials, but instead found myself in a sleek black SUV with Roman himself, his brother Thomas, and Eliza Winters. The Alpha King spent most of the trip on calls, his low voice discussing security arrangements and diplomatic strategies, while I stared out the window, trying to process the rapid changes in my life. "Nervous?" Thomas asked during a rare moment, when Roman stepped out of the vehicle at a security checkpoint. "Terrified," I admitted, seeing no point in pretense. He smiled, his expression more open than his brother's ever was. Good. The ones who aren't afraid are the first to make fatal mistakes. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. His gaze drifted to the pendant at my throat. Interesting choice of jewelry. I touched it self-consciously. It was my grandmother's. I know. Something in his tone made me look up sharply, but before I could question him, Roman returned, and the conversation died. The capital rose before us as we crested the final hill, an unexpected blend of ancient stone structures and modern architecture, surrounded by forested parkland rather than the urban sprawl I'd expected. At its center stood Castle Grey, the historic seat of the Alpha Kings, its granite walls gleaming silver in the afternoon light. "Welcome to Lunar City," Eliza said, noting my wide-eyed expression. "The only major werewolf settlement hidden in plain sight. Humans think it's a private historical preserve," Thomas explained. "We allow limited tourism to the outer districts, which maintains the illusion while funding our infrastructure." As we drove through the city streets, I was struck by the vibrant energy of the place, werewolves moving freely, without the careful restraint required in human areas. Some even shifted casually between forms in designated parks, something I'd rarely seen since leaving my childhood pack. Castle Grey proved even more impressive up close, part medieval fortress, part modern governmental compound. Guards nodded respectfully as our vehicle passed through multiple security checkpoints before stopping in a private courtyard. "Thomas will show you to your quarters," Roman said as we exited the vehicle. His first words to me since we'd left North Ridge. "Get settled. Your duties begin tomorrow morning." Before I could respond, he strode away, immediately surrounded by aides with urgent matters requiring his attention. I fought a wave of disappointment I had no right to feel. "Don't take it personally," Thomas said, noting my expression. "He's been dealing with the northern situation for months. It's escalating faster than anyone anticipated. I still don't understand why he thinks I can help," I said, as Thomas led me through vaulted corridors adorned with paintings of previous Alpha Kings. Many shared the same dark hair and intense gaze as Roman, a bloodline of power made visible through generations. "Because you represent something we've lost," he replied cryptically, "something the northern packs value above all else." My quarters were located in the Healer's Wing, adjacent to the Royal Infirmary, a spacious suite with a bedroom, sitting area, and small private garden accessible through French doors. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with medical texts, both ancient and modern, and a desk near the window held fresh parchment and writing implements. "The court physician will meet with you in the morning to discuss your duties," Thomas said. "In the meantime, feel free to explore the Healer's Wing. Dinner will be served in your quarters tonight, to give you time to adjust. And tomorrow? When do I begin serving as the Alpha King's personal healer? Roman has a meeting with the council at 10. He expects you to attend." Thomas moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Claire. The pendant you're wearing. I suggest keeping it concealed in public areas of the castle. Why? Because symbols have power, especially old ones." His expression grew serious. "Not everyone will be pleased to see a quiet walker in the Alpha King's court." After he left, I explored my new quarters, running my fingers along leather-bound tomes and examining the collection of healing herbs displayed in glass cabinets. Everything was impeccable, clearly prepared for my arrival with thoughtful attention to detail. The small garden revealed itself to be a healer's dream, raised beds filled with rare medicinal plants, many of which I'd only read about in Nora's texts. A small fountain bubbled in the center, its water catching the late afternoon sunlight. I settled on a stone bench, finally allowing myself a moment to breathe. My hand found my grandmother's journal, its familiar texture bringing comfort amidst the strangeness of my new surroundings. I opened it randomly, a habit I'd developed whenever seeking guidance, and found a passage I hadn't noticed before. "The quiet walker's gift manifests most strongly in liminal spaces, thresholds between one state and another, dawn and dusk, equinoxes and solstices, the moment between sleeping and waking. It is in these spaces that the veil thins, allowing the walker to perceive what others cannot." I traced the words with my fingertip, wondering what other secrets lay hidden in these pages. Nora had said the journal contained more than family history, that the answers I sought were hidden in plain sight. Perhaps it was time I studied it more systematically, rather than reading it piecemeal for comfort. As darkness fell, a servant arrived with dinner, a simple but elegant meal of roasted venison, seasonal vegetables, and fresh bread. After she departed, I settled at the desk with my grandmother's journal, determined to uncover whatever knowledge it held about my mysterious heritage. Hours passed as I pored over the entries, some written in my grandmother's flowing script, others copied from far older sources. Patterns began to emerge, references to the Quiet One and the Wolf Who Listens, scattered throughout otherwise mundane accounts of healing techniques. Carefully drawn symbols matched those on my pendant, each accompanied by cryptic notes about their meanings and uses. One passage in particular caught my attention, written in a different hand than my grandmother's. The Quiet Walker stands between realms, not merely flesh and spirit, but past and future, tradition and innovation. In times of greatest division, they emerge as bridge builders, healers not just of bodies but of packs. Their greatest strength lies not in dominance but in harmony, in the balance between opposing forces. The words resonated deep within me, stirring something that felt like recognition. Was this my purpose? To serve as some kind of bridge during this time of division between traditional and progressive factions? A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I opened the door to find a young woman in healer's attire, her expression nervous. "Forgive the late intrusion, Healer Bennett. I'm Lily, assistant to the court physician." She twisted her hands anxiously. "There's been an incident. The Alpha King has requested your immediate presence in his private study." I followed her through dimly lit corridors, my mind racing with possibilities. What kind of medical emergency would require my specific assistance, rather than the more experienced court physician? Lily stopped before an ornate door guarded by two stone-faced warriors. "Through here. He's waiting." The study was warm and surprisingly intimate. Bookshelves lining the walls, a fire crackling in a stone hearth. Deep leather chairs positioned around a low table. Roman stood with his back to the door, gazing out a window into the darkness beyond. He'd changed from his travel clothes into simple black pants and a gray Henley that did nothing to diminish his commanding presence. "You requested me, Alpha King?" I said, breaking the silence. He turned, and I gasped softly. A jagged cut ran along his left cheekbone, still seeping blood. Bruising had already begun to spread beneath his eye, and he held himself stiffly, suggesting additional injuries. "What happened?" I moved toward him instinctively, healer's instincts overriding protocol. "Training accident." His tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate. "Can you fix it?" "Of course, but the court physician—" "I didn't ask for the court physician. I asked for you." His voice held an edge of impatience. "I'd prefer this handled discreetly." Understanding dawned. A visible injury, even one sustained during training, could be perceived as weakness by rivals, particularly with the northern packs already challenging his authority. The Alpha King couldn't be seen as vulnerable, especially not now. "I'll need my supplies," I said, assessing the cut with professional detachment. "And better light. There's a healing kit in the cabinet behind you." "Will that suffice?" I found the kit, impressively comprehensive, and gestured for him to sit in one of the leather chairs. He complied without argument, which told me more about his condition than his stoic expression. "This may sting," I warned, cleaning the cut with antiseptic. He didn't flinch, though I knew it must have burned. As I worked, I became increasingly aware of our proximity, of the warmth radiating from his skin, of his scent, pine and rain and something uniquely him. My fingers trembled slightly as I prepared to suture the wound. "You're nervous," he observed. "I've never treated an Alpha King before." A hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "We bleed the same as anyone else." Some might consider that statement treasonous. "Then it's fortunate we're alone." He studied me as I threaded the needle. "Your pendant. It's new." My hand went to the silver wolf instinctively. "It was my grandmother's. Nora gave it to me before I left." "Do you know what it represents?" "The Quiet Walker bloodline," I said, beginning the first suture. To his credit, he remained perfectly still, though I'm still trying to understand exactly what that means. "It means you're rarer than you realize." His gaze was intense despite his injured state. "There hasn't been a confirmed Quiet Walker in the territories for over a century. Then how can you be certain that's what I am? Because I felt your wolf during the ceremony. The admission seemed to cost him something. Not just her presence, but her nature. She's different. I focused on the sutures, needing the distraction from his scrutiny. Different has rarely been considered a virtue in our society. Perhaps that's what needs to change. Something in his tone made me look up, meeting his gaze directly. For a moment, neither of us spoke, caught in a current of unspoken communication that left me breathless. I broke the connection first, returning to my task. There are other injuries, I said, noting the way he winced when shifting position. Your ribs? It's nothing. With respect, Alpha King, I can't serve as your healer if you withhold information about your condition. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're bolder than you appear, Claire Bennett. Only when it comes to healing. I finished the final suture and placed a small bandage over the wound. The cut should heal cleanly, with minimal scarring. Now, your ribs. After a moment of consideration, he relented, lifting his shirt to reveal extensive bruising along his left side. I gasped at the mottled purple spreading across his ribs and abdomen, a stark contrast against his tanned skin. This is from a training accident? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. In a manner of speaking, his expression remained neutral as I gently probed the area, checking for fractures. 2 cracked ribs, I concluded. They need binding, and you should avoid strenuous activity for at least a few days. Not possible. Then they'll take longer to heal and cause you unnecessary pain. Pain is manageable. I sat back on my heels, frustration bubbling up. Why request a healer if you intend to ignore their advice? His eyes narrowed. I requested you to treat the visible injury discreetly, not to dictate my schedule. Then perhaps you should have specified that in your instructions. The words escaped before I could censor them. And I froze, suddenly aware of my impertinence. To my surprise, Roman laughed, a short, genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Thomas said you had unexpected fire beneath that quiet exterior. It seems he was right. Before I could respond, he sobered. The Northern delegation arrives tomorrow for continued negotiations. I can't appear weakened in any way. Understanding dawned. This wasn't a training accident at all, was it? His silence was confirmation enough. Who? I asked, anger rising on his behalf. It doesn't matter. It does if they intended to sabotage tomorrow's negotiations by injuring you. He studied me with renewed interest. You understand politics better than I gave you credit for. I understand human, or werewolf, nature, I corrected, reaching for the bandages. Hold still. This needs proper binding regardless of your plans. As I worked to wrap his ribs, my fingers occasionally brushing against his warm skin, I became aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere between us. His breathing had deepened, and his scent had changed slightly, carrying notes I couldn't identify, but that made my wolf stir restlessly within me. There, I said, securing the bandage. That's the best I can do without proper rest and time. It will suffice. He lowered his shirt, watching me thoughtfully. Your technique is different from other healers I've observed. I began packing away the supplies, avoiding his gaze. How so? You don't just treat the injury, you seem to communicate with it somehow. The observation hit uncomfortably close to the truth. When binding his ribs, I'd instinctively found myself using the quieter techniques my grandmother had taught me, not just wrapping the bandages, but whispering to the damaged tissues, encouraging healing at a level deeper than the physical. Old family techniques, I said vaguely. Nothing special. I think we both know that's not true. He stood, moving with careful grace despite his injuries. Tomorrow's meeting starts at 10. Be prepared for hostility from the Northern delegation. They won't appreciate your presence. Because of what I represent? Because of what they fear you represent? He moved to the door, then paused. Claire. It was the first time he'd used my given name alone, without my surname attached. The sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through me. Yes, Alpha King. Thank you. The word seemed unfamiliar on his tongue, awkward yet sincere. Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me alone in the study with a lingering scent of pine, rain, and something I was beginning to recognize as desire. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind cycling through the day's events and the implications of what I'd discovered in my grandmother's journal. By dawn, I'd made a decision. If I was to serve as the Alpha King's healer, and potentially play some role in the brewing conflict, I needed to understand my abilities fully. I slipped into the private garden as the first rays of sunlight crept over the castle walls. According to my grandmother's writings, dawn was one of the liminal times when a quiet walker's gifts were strongest. I settled cross-legged on the stone path, the pendant warm against my skin, and closed my eyes. To find your wolf, my grandmother had written, you must first find the silence between heartbeats, the space between breaths, the moment between thought and action. I focused on my breathing, allowing it to slow and deepen. Gradually, the sounds around me sharpened, the whisper of leaves, the crystalline notes of water in the fountain, the distant song of birds welcoming the day. Beneath it all, I became aware of another rhythm, a pulse that didn't originate within me but resonated through me. The castle itself, I realized with wonder. I'm feeling its essence. I extended my awareness further, allowing the sensation to guide me deeper into the meditative state. There, in the quiet between thoughts, I finally found her, my wolf, curled within me, watchful and waiting. Not hiding, as I'd believed, but patient, preserving her strength. Why won't you come forward? I asked silently. Why retreat when I need you most? Her answer came not in words but in impressions, emotions, fragments of memory, the night of the massacre, the overwhelming grief, the instinctive knowledge that shifting then would have broken something fundamental within me. She had protected me the only way she knew how, by withdrawing until I was ready to bear the truth of what we were together. And now? I questioned. Am I ready now? The response was immediate, a surge of energy so powerful it took my breath away. Not yet, but soon. When the moment came, we would know. I opened my eyes to find the garden transformed. Colors appeared more vibrant, scents more complex. Each plant seemed to pulse with its own unique signature of energy, one I could somehow read as easily as words on a page. This was the Quiet Walker gift. Not just communion with my wolf, but with all living things. Remarkable, a voice said from the doorway. I turned to find an elderly man watching me, his white hair contrasting sharply with his dark skin. Though he wore the simple attire of a healer, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone accustomed to respect. Dr. Solomon, I guessed, recognizing the court physician from Thomas's description. And you're the mysterious Claire Bennett. He approached slowly, studying me with keen interest. I wondered what Roman saw in you that prompted such an unexpected appointment. Now I begin to understand. I rose, suddenly self-conscious. You were watching me? I was coming to introduce myself before our scheduled meeting. He gestured to the pendant at my throat. But when I saw that symbol and the energy field surrounding you during your meditation, professional curiosity got the better of me. You can see energy fields? He smiled, the expression warming his austere features. One doesn't serve as court physician to 3 generations of Alpha Kings without developing certain sensitivities. He tilted his head, assessing me. Your grandmother was Eliza Bennett? Yes. Did you know her? We corresponded occasionally on healing techniques. Something like sadness flickered across his face. She was a remarkable woman, one of the last true practitioners of the old ways. Did she tell you what I was? She didn't need to. He gestured for me to follow him into the infirmary. The signs were there in her descriptions of you, for those who knew what to look for. The Royal Infirmary proved to be a seamless blend of traditional healing space and modern medical facility, with state-of-the-art equipment alongside cabinets of ancient remedies. Dr. Solomon moved through it with practiced efficiency, outlining my duties and responsibilities while I tried to absorb everything. The Alpha King rarely requires medical attention, he explained, but when he does, absolute discretion is essential. Any sign of physical vulnerability could be exploited by his enemies, I finished. I understand. I treated a wound for him last night. Dr. Solomon raised an eyebrow. Did you now? And how did you find your first official patient? Stubborn, I admitted. He refused to rest properly. The elderly physician laughed. You'll find that trait runs in the gray bloodline. His expression grew more serious. Today's meeting with the Northern delegation is critical. Watch the Alpha King carefully. He won't admit to pain, but you'll need to monitor his condition. Why is this conflict happening now? I asked. What's changed to make the Northern Pack so determined to break away? Dr. Solomon's gaze turned contemplative. Power vacuums create opportunity. The former Alpha King's death after 2 decades of increasingly conservative rule left questions about the direction our society would take. He began organizing instruments with methodical precision. Roman represents change, modernization, integration with human society, less emphasis on traditional hierarchies. The Northern Packs see this as a threat to their way of life. And where do you stand, Doctor? I stand with the oath I took to heal all who need healing, regardless of politics. He smiled faintly. But between us, stagnation is a slow death. Change is necessary, though it must be balanced with respect for tradition. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, you should prepare for the council meeting. Wear your formal healer's attire. Appearance matters in these situations. The council chamber occupied the highest level of the castle's central tower, a circular room with walls of glass offering panoramic views of the city and surrounding territories. A massive round table dominated the space, carved from a single ancient oak and inscribed with the territorial boundaries of all major packs. I arrived precisely at 10, dressed in the formal white and silver robes of a royal healer that had been delivered to my quarters. The pendant rested against my skin beneath the high collar, hidden as Thomas had advised. Roman was already present, engaged in quiet discussion with his brother and several advisors. He looked immaculate in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. No trace of last night's injuries was visible, save for a faint line along his cheekbone, which most would attribute to normal werewolf roughhousing rather than a deliberate attack. His gaze found me as I entered, a flash of appreciation in his dark eyes, before his expression returned to careful neutrality. He nodded slightly, indicating I should take the empty seat to his left, a position of significance that wasn't lost on the others present, judging by their curious glances. "The Northern delegation has arrived," announced Dominic from the doorway. "Alpha Garrett Stone and representatives from the 7 Northern territories." Roman straightened, an almost imperceptible wince betraying the pain in his ribs. "Show them in." The Northern wolves entered with the confidence of predators on familiar hunting grounds. Garrett Stone led them, a massive man with silver-streaked auburn hair and cold blue eyes that assessed everyone present with calculating precision. Behind him came 6 others, territorial alphas and their seconds, each radiating barely contained aggression. "Alpha King," Garrett acknowledged, his tone just shy of insolent. His gaze shifted to me, his nostrils flaring slightly. "I see you've brought new blood to your inner circle." "Claire Bennett, my personal healer," Roman replied smoothly. "I trust her presence won't be an issue." Garrett's eyes narrowed as he studied me more carefully. "Bennett? Of Red Moon Pack?" "Originally, yes," I confirmed, forcing myself to meet his intimidating gaze. Something like recognition flickered across his face before he turned his attention back to Roman. "We have much to discuss, Alpha King. Shall we begin?" The meeting proceeded with tense formality as both sides presented their positions. The Northern demands were substantial. Greater autonomy in governance, stricter adherence to traditional pack structures, less interaction with human society, and most controversially, a return to bloodline-based hierarchy that would effectively diminish the status of mixed heritage wolves. These terms represent the minimum requirements for continued unity, Garrett concluded. Our patience grows thin. Roman had listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and authoritative. "I understand your concerns about preserving our heritage," he said. "But some of these demands would return us to a system that nearly tore us apart during my father's reign." "Your father understood the importance of tradition," Garrett countered. "Diluting our bloodlines, our customs, that's what will truly destroy us. Adaptation has ensured our survival for centuries," Roman replied. "The world is changing. We must change with it, or be left behind." "At what cost?" One of the other Northern alphas leaned forward. Our young already prefer human cities to packed territories. They adopt human values, human weaknesses. Soon, what will separate us from them besides the ability to shift? The debate continued, growing increasingly heated as fundamental differences in vision became apparent. Throughout, I observed Roman carefully, noting the minute signs of discomfort he concealed from the others, the slight stiffness in his movements, the occasional tightening around his eyes when he shifted position. It was during a particularly tense exchange that I felt it, a shift in the energy of the room, a subtle darkening around Garrett that my newly awakened senses perceived as malevolent intent. My wolf surged within me, suddenly alert and protective. Without thinking, I placed my hand on Roman's arm, a seemingly supportive gesture that allowed me to whisper a warning. "He knows you're injured. He's going to challenge you physically." Roman gave no outward sign of having heard me, but beneath my palm, his muscles tensed in preparation. Sure enough, Garrett abruptly changed tactics. "Perhaps we've talked enough for today," the Northern Alpha said, rising to his impressive height. "In the old tradition, let us settle this as wolves, not politicians. I challenge you to single combat, Alpha King. Let strength decide the future of our packs." The room went silent. A formal challenge couldn't be refused without severe loss of face, yet accepting it would force Roman to fight with cracked ribs against a fresh opponent, exactly as someone had planned. "An interesting proposal," Roman replied, his voice betraying none of the pain I knew he must be feeling, but rather unimaginative. The old ways offered more than just tooth and claw to resolve conflicts. Garrett frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "The trial of integration." Roman's unexpected answer sent murmurs through both delegations, in which representatives from opposing factions must work together to overcome a challenge that neither could surmount alone. "That hasn't been used in centuries," Garrett scoffed. "Because it requires wisdom as well as strength." Roman stood, matching Garrett's stance. "Choose your champion, Alpha Stone. I've chosen mine." He placed his hand on my shoulder, sending shockwaves through the assembly. "Her?" Garrett looked incredulous. "The healer?" "Precisely." Roman's confidence never wavered. "Your strongest warrior paired with Claire Bennett. If they can successfully complete the trial, I will accept your core demands. If they fail, you will accept my proposed compromises." Confusion and outrage erupted from the Northern delegation, while Thomas and the royal advisors exchanged alarmed glances. I remained frozen, unable to comprehend why Roman would stake everything on my untested abilities. "And what exactly would this trial entail?" Garrett demanded once the clamor subsided. "The Moonstone Caverns," Roman said. "Your champion must retrieve the Alpha Stone from the heart of the labyrinth, but the path is protected by barriers that only a healer versed in the old ways can neutralize." Understanding dawned slowly. The Moonstone Caverns were legendary, a natural formation beneath the castle that had served as a proving ground for Alpha Kings since the earliest days of our kind. According to legend, only those worthy could navigate its depths and claim the Alpha Stone, a crystal said to resonate with the ancestral power. "And if I refuse this archaic test?" Garrett challenged. "Then you demonstrate that your commitment to the old ways extends only to those traditions that benefit you personally," Roman replied smoothly. Hardly the position of a principled leader. Garrett's face darkened with anger, but he was trapped by his own rhetoric. To refuse would undermine his entire argument about respecting ancient traditions. "Very well," he growled finally. "I choose Alexander as my champion." He gestured to a towering warrior with ice-blue eyes and a scar running from temple to jaw. "When does this trial begin?" "At moonrise," Roman declared, "the traditional time for all trials of leadership." The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, the Northern delegation departing with barely concealed fury. The moment they were gone, I rounded on Roman. "Have you lost your mind?" I hissed, propriety forgotten in my panic. "I know nothing about these caverns or how to neutralize magical barriers." "But you will," he said with unsettling certainty, "because your grandmother left you everything you need to know." He nodded toward my chest, where the pendant lay hidden. "That's not merely a symbol of your bloodline, Claire. It's a key." Hours later, I found myself in Roman's private study, surrounded by ancient texts and maps of the Moonstone Caverns. Thomas had joined us, along with Dr. Solomon, whose knowledge of castle history proved invaluable. The trial hasn't been attempted in over 2 centuries, the elderly physician explained, unrolling a yellowed parchment. Not since the Great Division, when the territories were first established. Why choose this particular test? I asked Roman, who stood by the window, his profile sharp against the fading daylight. Because it can't be won through strength alone, he replied. The Northern Packs value their warriors above all else, but this trial requires balance, strength tempered by healing, aggression channeled through wisdom. A metaphor for the unity you're trying to preserve, Thomas observed. Precisely. Roman turned to face us. The Northern Packs aren't wrong about everything. We have lost touch with certain aspects of our heritage, the deeper magic that once defined us. But returning to blood purity and rigid hierarchies isn't the answer. And you believe I can help bridge that divide? I asked, still struggling to understand my role in his strategy. I know you can. His certainty was unshakable. Your grandmother's journal. Did you bring it? I produced the leather-bound book, which Roman immediately opened to the final pages, revealing diagrams I'd never noticed before. Maps of the caverns with notations in my grandmother's flowing script. She knew this day would come, he said softly. She prepared you for it, even if you didn't realize it. As moonrise approached, I changed into the clothing Roman had provided. A simple gray tunic and pants, designed for ease of movement, with my grandmother's pendant now displayed openly around my neck. My stomach churned with anxiety as I made my way to the castle's lower levels, where the entrance to the caverns awaited. A small gathering had assembled to witness our departure. Roman and Thomas, Dr. Solomon, representatives from both delegations, and my assigned partner, Alexander, who regarded me with undisguised contempt. Remember what we discussed, Roman said quietly, as he fastened a small pack containing essential supplies around my waist. Trust your instincts. Your wolf will guide you when needed. What if she doesn't come when called? I whispered, voicing my deepest fear. What if I fail you? His hand caught mine, warm and unexpectedly gentle. You won't. The conviction in his voice steadied me. But even if something goes wrong, remember that I chose this trial for a reason. There's more at stake than politics. Before I could ask what he meant, Garrett approached with Alexander. Moonrise is upon us, the Northern Alpha announced. Let the trial begin. The entrance to the Moonstone Caverns yawned before us, a natural arch in the living rock beneath the castle. As tradition dictated, we would enter with only minimal supplies. No modern technology, no weapons save for Alexander's ceremonial dagger. Our goal: retrieve the Alpha Stone from the heart of the labyrinth and return before the next moonrise, 24 hours later. May the ancestors guide your path, Roman intoned formally, though his eyes remained fixed on me, conveying something deeper than the ritual words. Alexander strode forward without hesitation, clearly expecting me to follow. With one last glance at Roman, I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness that would test everything I thought I knew about myself. The caverns lived up to their name, the walls embedded with crystalline formations that caught and amplified the light from our single torch. Alexander moved with confident purpose, following markers etched into the stone by generations of wolves who had traversed these passages. Stay close, he ordered curtly. I won't be slowed by having to search for you if you wander off. I'm not here as your burden, I replied evenly. I'm here because you can't complete this trial without me. He scoffed, but didn't argue further as we descended deeper into the earth. The passages narrowed and widened unpredictably, sometimes forcing us to squeeze through tight openings, other times opening into vast chambers where stalactites hung like frozen daggers from distant ceilings. It was in the third such chamber that we encountered our first barrier, a seemingly solid wall of blue-white energy stretching from floor to ceiling, humming with ancient power. Now we see if you're worth the air you breathe, Alexander said, gesturing toward the obstacle. Neutralize it, healer. I approached cautiously, my grandmother's instructions echoing in my mind. The pendant grew warm against my skin as I studied the barrier, perceiving it not just with my eyes, but with the deeper senses I'd begun to access that morning. The barriers respond to intention, she had written. They are not meant to keep all away, only those whose hearts are closed to balance. I removed the pendant, holding it before me like an offering. We seek passage to fulfill the trial of integration, I said, the formal words coming naturally. I stand as healer, he as warrior, together in balance as the old ways demand. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the pendant began to glow with the same blue-white light as the barrier, which shimmered and parted like a curtain, revealing the passage beyond. Alexander's expression shifted from skepticism to grudging respect. Perhaps there's more to you than appearances suggest, Bennett. We continued deeper, encountering increasingly complex barriers that required not just the pendant's power, but specific actions from both of us, sometimes combined strength to move obstacles, other times careful navigation through sections where the very air seemed charged with unpredictable energy that responded differently to healer and warrior. To my surprise, Alexander proved to be an adaptable partner. Once convinced of my utility, he began consulting me on decisions, recognizing that my perceptions offered insights his strength alone couldn't provide. Gradually, a wary respect developed between us as we progressed through challenges that forced us to rely on each other's unique abilities. "Why did you agree to serve as Roman's champion?" he asked during a brief rest, several hours into our journey. "You don't strike me as someone who craves power or position." "I didn't exactly have a choice," I admitted. "It all happened very quickly. There's always a choice." He took a swig from his water flask. "Even when the options seem limited," I studied him thoughtfully. "Why did you agree to represent Garrett? Do you truly believe isolation is the answer to preserving our heritage?" Something complicated flickered across his scarred face. "I believe in protecting what matters. My mate. She's from a mixed bloodline. Under the old regime, she would never have been accepted in the Northern Territories." He looked away. "But times are changing, and not all of us welcome Garrett's vision of returning to the past. Then why support him? Because loyalty to Pack comes first," he said, though doubt shadowed his words. "At least, that's what we're taught." His confession shifted something between us, a newfound honesty that would serve us well as we faced the final challenges of the labyrinth. The heart of the caverns revealed itself after what felt like endless hours of navigation. A vast chamber where the ceiling opened to the night sky, allowing moonlight to pour in and illuminate thousands of crystalline formations. At its center stood a single column of stone, atop which rested a crystal unlike any I'd ever seen, swirling with internal light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The Alpha Stone. "We found it," Alexander breathed, moving forward eagerly. "Wait," I cautioned, sensing something wasn't right. "There's one final barrier." Indeed, as we approached, the air before the stone column shimmered with power, the strongest barrier yet. But unlike the others, this one didn't yield to my pendant or our combined efforts. After multiple attempts, we sat exhausted at its perimeter, no closer to our goal. "What now, healer?" Alexander asked, frustration evident in his voice. "Dawn approaches, and we're still half a day's journey from the surface." I closed my eyes, seeking guidance in the silence between heartbeats as my grandmother had taught me. The answer came not in words but in understanding, a profound recognition of what the trial truly required. "It's not about the stone," I said slowly, opening my eyes. "The entire trial, it's not about retrieving an object. It's about what we become in the attempt." Alexander frowned. "Speak plainly." "The barrier requires something we haven't offered yet." I stood, suddenly certain. "Truth. Our truth." Before he could question further, I stepped forward, placing my hand against the shimmering barrier. "I am Claire Bennett, last of Red Moon Pack," I declared. "I have hidden from my true nature out of fear. Fear of power I don't understand. Fear of standing out when all I've wanted was to belong." The words flowed from some deep wellspring of honesty. "I am a quiet walker, a bridge between worlds, and I accept this gift not for myself, but for the healing it can bring to all our kind." The barrier flickered, responding to my truth, but not yet yielding. I turned to Alexander. "Your turn." He hesitated, then stepped forward with the resolution of a warrior facing inevitable battle. I am Alexander Volkov, champion of Northern Ice Pack, he stated. I have followed orders out of loyalty while doubting the path we've chosen. I believe in preserving our heritage, but not at the cost of our future, his voice strengthened. I fight for a world where my mate and children can live proudly without hiding their mixed blood, even as I honor the traditions that shaped me. The barrier pulsed once, twice, then dissolved completely, leaving the path to the Alpha Stone clear. Together we approached the column, but when Alexander reached for the stone, I placed my hand on his arm. Both of us, I said. Together. Our fingers closed around the crystal simultaneously. Light exploded through the chamber, blinding in its intensity. When my vision cleared, I found myself not in the cavern, but in a misty realm between worlds, my wolf standing before me in physical form for the first time in 2 years. She was beautiful, pale silver, with eyes of deep blue, neither imposing nor aggressive, but radiating a quiet strength I'd failed to recognize in myself. She approached slowly, her gaze holding mine. It is time, she communicated without words. We are needed, not as separate entities, but as one being, one purpose. I'm afraid, I admitted, of what we might become together. Fear is natural, she acknowledged, but so is growth. We are the bridge, Claire, between past and future, between strength and healing. This is our purpose, to help others find balance by embodying it ourselves. As she spoke, I understood what had eluded me for so long. My wolf hadn't retreated out of weakness, but out of wisdom, waiting until I was ready to embrace our shared destiny. With that realization came acceptance, and with acceptance, transformation. We merged, not in the physical sense of shifting, but in a deeper spiritual union that left me forever changed. When the mist cleared and I found myself back in the cavern, I knew with absolute certainty that I would never again doubt my place in the world. Alexander stood beside me, his expression suggesting he'd experienced something equally profound. The Alpha Stone glowed softly between us, its light pulsing in rhythm with our heartbeats. We should return, he said quietly, a new respect in his voice. There is much to discuss with our leaders. The journey back passed in contemplative silence, both of us processing what we'd experienced. When we finally emerged into the castle courtyard, the gathered witnesses gasped at our appearance, not because we were injured or disheveled, but because of the transformation evident in our bearing. Roman stepped forward, his dark eyes seeking mine with an intensity that sent warmth flooding through me. You succeeded. Yes and no, I replied, my voice steadier and more confident than it had ever been. We have the stone, but what we found was something far more valuable. Garrett pushed forward. What nonsense is this? Either you completed the trial or you failed. We completed it, Alexander stated firmly, but not as you might expect, Alpha. He extended the Alpha Stone, which continued to pulse with inner light. The trial teaches a lesson our packs have forgotten, that true strength comes from balance, from integration of seemingly opposing forces. Eloquent words from a warrior, Garrett sneered. Has one day with a healer turned you into a philosopher? One day in the caverns has reminded me of truths we've neglected, Alexander countered. I will not support a return to laws that would exile my own mate and children, Alpha Stone. Nor will I stand by while we isolate ourselves from a changing world out of fear disguised as tradition. Murmurs rippled through both delegations as Alexander's declaration hung in the air. Garrett's face darkened with rage. You dare defy me? You're Alpha? I dare speak truth, Alexander replied calmly, as is my right as your chosen champion. Roman stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. The trial has been completed successfully, he announced. As agreed, negotiations will continue with adjusted terms that honor both tradition and necessary evolution. This means nothing, Garrett snarled. A manipulated test with a predetermined outcome. The outcome was determined by forces beyond any of us, I interjected, drawing surprised looks from those who had previously dismissed me. The same ancestral power that confirmed Roman as Alpha King guided us through the caverns. To demonstrate my point, I held up the pendant, which glowed with the same inner light as the Alpha Stone. The two resonated visibly, creating harmonics that filled the courtyard with ethereal sound. "The Quiet Walker has returned," Dr. Solomon announced, his aged voice carrying unexpected authority. "As the ancient prophecies foretold, when division threatens to tear apart what generations have built, the wolf who walks between worlds will emerge to restore balance." Garrett's gaze fixed on my pendant, recognition and shock replacing anger. "It cannot be," he whispered. "The Bennett bloodline was thought lost." "Not lost," Roman corrected. "Merely waiting for the right moment." He moved to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine in a gesture of unity. "This is the balance I propose, Alpha Stone. Not abandonment of tradition, but integration with necessary progress. Not dilution of our heritage, but enrichment through diversity." The next hours blurred into a flurry of negotiations, discussions, and gradual reconciliation as the story of our journey through the caverns spread throughout the castle. By nightfall, a tentative agreement had been reached, one that preserved essential traditions while creating space for necessary evolution. I found Roman alone on a castle balcony after the final documents were signed, his gaze fixed on the rising moon. He seemed different somehow, the weight of impending conflict lifted from his shoulders, revealing the man beneath the Alpha King. "You knew," I said, joining him at the railing, "about the true purpose of the trial. About what would happen when Alexander and I reached the stone." "I suspected," he admitted. "Your grandmother contacted me before she died, you know. She shared a prophecy about a time of division and the Quiet Walker who would help heal the rift. So everything, selecting me as your healer, the ceremony, all of it, was to fulfill a prophecy? It began that way," he acknowledged, turning to face me fully. "But somewhere between your sitting on my throne and emerging from those caverns as the woman who stands before me now, it became about much more than prophecy." The intensity in his gaze made my heart race. My wolf, now a constant presence rather than a reluctant companion, stirred with pleasure and recognition. "What happens now?" I asked softly. "Now we build something new," he said, his hand finding mine on the stone railing. "Something balanced between what was and what could be." He hesitated, an uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. "That is, if you're willing to remain by my side, not just as my healer, but as my partner in what comes next." I looked up at him, this powerful man who had recognized something in me before I'd seen it in myself. "As your mate, you mean?" "Eventually, yes." His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. "But first as my equal, my counterbalance, the strength to my strength, the wisdom to my determination." He stepped closer, his scent enveloping me. "The northern packs will respect you now, especially once word spreads about your bloodline. Together we can show them that honoring tradition doesn't mean rejecting progress." "And is that all I would be to you, a political advantage?" His free hand rose to cup my cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle for one so powerful. "You know better than that, Claire Bennett. You've seen beneath the surface of things since the moment you sat on my throne." The truth of his words resonated within me. From our first meeting, something had connected us beyond politics or position, a recognition of complementary natures, of pieces that fit together to create something stronger than either could be alone. "Yes," I said simply. "I'll stay." His smile transformed his severe features, revealing the man few were privileged to see beneath the Alpha King exterior. Slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with the passion we'd both been restraining. My wolf surged forward in joyful recognition, finally at peace with her place in the world, and with the mate fate had chosen for us. As Roman pulled me closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that matched my own, I understood what my grandmother had meant in her final journal entry. True power comes not from dominance, but from balance, not from forcing others to yield, but from finding the strength to remain soft in a world that worships hardness. Remember this, my Claire, when you stand beside the king who will need your gentle heart as much as you need his protective strength. In the months that followed, the territories began the complicated process of reconciliation and reform. The northern packs, with Alexander now serving as their representative, gradually accepted the balanced approach Roman advocated, preserving essential traditions while embracing necessary changes. My position evolved from personal healer to full partner in governance, my quiet walker abilities bringing a perspective that had been missing from werewolf leadership for generations. Roman and I were mated in a ceremony that honored both ancient traditions and modern sensibilities, beneath a full moon with representatives from all territories in attendance. Even Garrett Stone eventually acknowledged the wisdom of our union, though he would never be our strongest ally. The Alpha Stone was returned to the heart of the Moonstone Caverns, its purpose fulfilled. But my grandmother's pendant remained with me, a constant reminder of the heritage I had finally embraced and the bridge I had become between worlds that had nearly torn themselves apart. "Do you ever regret it?" Roman asked one evening as we stood on our balcony, watching the moon rise over the unified territories, being thrust into this role before you were ready. I leaned into his embrace, feeling the steady strength that had become my anchor in a world of constant change. "I was never thrust into anything," I corrected gently. "I sat on your throne of my own accord, remember? Some part of me knew exactly where I belonged, even when I thought I was making a terrible mistake." He laughed, the sound rumbling pleasantly against my back. "The best kind of mistake, as it turned out." "The only kind worth making," I agreed, turning in his arms to kiss him beneath the light of the moon that had witnessed our journey from strangers to partners to mates. "The kind that leads you exactly where you're meant to be."